I am here today with Pastor Chris, who is a student at my husband's academy. And Pastor Chris, thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to talk with you today.
And so today I brought Pastor Chris on, and I called him last week and I was like, hey, I really want to talk about giving. And I've had a conversation with him because I was kind of having some difficulties in finding myself feeling a certain way that I needed some guidance. And so I called him and I was like, hey, can we do this? And so here we are.
Yeah, awesome.
And so today's podcast, I want to focus on giving. This time of year, we are in the holiday season, and giving, and kind of why I wanted to give. I think that's super important. Always knowing why you should give or why you want to give, finding the root, and just to kind of give, before I add Pastor Chris into this conversation, where my brain is back in October. I was like, okay, November and December are big months for giving. I want to give. And I decided that we were going to do canned food drive in November. And then I was going to do something else for December. And of course I did the canned food drive, and I thought it was funny because it was, everybody and their brother was doing canned food drive in November. And I thought it would be reverse. I thought it would be canned food drive in December, and then, practically nothing in November.
Yeah.
And so I did want to ask, like, some things that you do in the church. Because I know, so what we ended up doing is I ended up, once we decided to do the canned food drive for November, for the month of November, I reached out to Pastor Chris and I was like, hey, we would love to donate these things to you. And, do you have someone? And that's where we were able to connect, and he was able to help in that regard. So I guess what I'd like to ask you about is why do you think that people want to give? Like, I know
It's a
that's
good question. So that's a good question, though. I think people are motivated variously, let's say. There is, on a spectrum of, let's call it something like positive or negative reasons to give. And I see this a lot in the churches and in our mission work in Haiti and increasingly in other parts of the world, where there's a way to give that sometimes, let's start at the most negative. Some people, I think, give in order to pass gratitude to themselves through the person they give it to. In other words, there's a kind of, let's say, false motivation for giving where I give only because it makes me feel good. Now, that's not to say that it making you feel good is a problem. However, there is a kind of giving where it's like, hey, like I say sometimes when I take people to Haiti, don't pat the little Haitian kid on the head and say, oh, here you go, here's $1 worth of such and such, and don't I leave feeling like I'm such an important person. So there's a way to give that's not really the best way to give, where, again, you're like passing gratitude to yourself through the person to whom you gave. I think that's a bad motivation, and I think that's a fairly common motivation. Okay, and then moving more towards like more and more positive reasons to give, I think there are people who genuinely, like I've found in Naples, Florida, my only hesitation in moving here a couple of years ago is I thought, I'm a poor kid from a messed up part of California, and how could somebody like me ever live in Naples, Florida, where there is, although there's every kind of person, there is a high concentration of very wealthy people. Okay, among those very wealthy people, I have found 201 that I've met so far that, and I'm sure there's others who don't fit this bill, but the vast majority of them, like I know a guy who made his money as a garbage man. And I mean, he started out picking up garbage and eventually owned a big garbage company, sold out, made a bunch of money. And I know that this particular individual, and a lot of people like him, they never forgot where they came from. So they're like, oh, when I give to the less fortunate, I'm giving to myself, but not in the way that the person who gave in order to receive the gratitude gave. They're saying everybody could use some help. Everybody could use the blessing. And it makes them feel good to do it, but not out of a sense of like, what a good person I am. More so out of like an authentic desire to give back. And then that's a good reason, I think. That's a really good reason. And then there are others who I think, like obviously I'm a Christian pastor. So I use Bible basis for giving. I want to live a life that looks like Jesus. But here's the thing. The essential principle, or what I would call the highest principle of giving biblically, it's universal to every culture. And what is it? It's something like giving is the ambassador of kindness. And so for a person who genuinely has a sense of appreciation for the good things in their life, whether they're a follower of Jesus or they're not, there tends to be a desire, I think, among a lot of people that they want to express kindness, that they recognize that if they're going to change the world, it has to start in the mirror, and the best way to change myself is to give something away. Most of us grow by reduction. We grow by trimming the hedges on our own selfishness, our own vanity. And I find that to be really commonly true, both in the churches and the people I take to Haiti, and then in just, people that I know.
Well, and I think, so I believe that giving is also sharing. Yeah. So I think giving is, and depending on what you're doing, giving can also be sharing a part of yourself, of your knowledge base. And so I think that it is just something that we should do. And if you're in a position to do it, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so my husband and I, coming from humble means, we love to give back. I really, really like, there's been times where I've been hungry. Yeah. And so I loved the idea of doing a canned food drive. And so we made it fun. And we asked students to bring in cans. And if they brought in, the individual who brought in the most cans, they won a rash guard. And then the group, and we broke it into adults, the youth class, which is my 5 to 8 year olds, and then the juniors program, which is the, kind of like my 9 to 12, 13 year olds. And we told them if the team who brings in the most cans, they will win an acai party. I ended up just doing it on a Saturday and feeding everybody and making everybody happy, because I was so grateful that so many people had participated. And so my why for giving, doing this thing where I give the food is because I had that experience, and I felt like if I was in a position to help, that I should. Yeah. And here's where I had an issue, and is kind of figuring out. I knew I wanted to do something, and I had to figure out what I was going to do. And because of my own personal experience, that's why I decided on the canned food drive. Mm-hmm. And then it was the how, figuring out how I was going to do it. And that's when I contacted Pastor Chris, and I was like, hey, if I do this thing, are you interested in kind of, collaborating and working together on this? And of course he was like, yeah, of course. And then also, but here's where I got stuck, and why I really enjoyed my conversation with Pastor Chris is I am not a very flashy person. My husband, if you've ever met him, he's not a very flashy person. He goes to church with sandals on and Crocs. But I felt so guilty about taking pictures, sharing it on social media. I felt like I was being, I had seen, and I think we talked about this previously. So I had seen a post where there's a guy and he's handing a bag of food to a starving family and their children, and he's taking a selfie of it and then posting it online. Yeah. And I felt like that's what I was doing. And I really liked our conversation where you're like, not so much. So I'd like to expand on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people, and this has come up a number of times in the churches over the years, and on a personal level, and especially on the mission field, where someone's like, well, I want to do something. Like I have a good friend of mine who donates, and he says he doesn't even want the charitable donation letter. He said, I'm not giving for a tax write-off. But I'm like, but takes the tax write-off to help you to be in a better position to give more in the future. Don't waste the opportunity. Maybe that's a way God's blessing you to help your business that you give. So there's that. And then there are other people who are like, okay, in the Bible, in the New Testament, there's a passage where the Bible says, when you give, Jesus is saying, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, right? Do it in secret. Okay. what's he talking about? If you look at the context of the passage, this is not a universal idea that no one can know what you do, right? Jesus died on the cross and said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men to myself. So it was a public spectacle. The ultimate gift was a public spectacle. Okay. So the principle then cannot be that it has to be utterly and completely in secret. However, in the context of that passage, it's talking about somebody's heart. Don't give so that others. He's telling people who were the religious people of that day, the Pharisees. When these people get up and pray, they pray so that everybody can hear how eloquent they are. He's talking about a condition of the heart. In another passage of Scripture, the Bible says that God loves a cheerful giver, not somebody who gives because they have to give. So if God loves the giver, and if it can be done publicly, but you got to protect your heart, then there's a number of reasons to give, and make sure people know about it. I know of a man who is, to this day, a substantial contributor to our work in Haiti. And I had one time said, hey, do you want to keep this secret? I know you're not a flashy guy. I know you don't like to make much of yourself. He said, no, I want you to make it public because I want every one of my business partners to see what we did and be challenged to do likewise. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Now we don't like rub it in their face and try to make them feel guilty for not doing it. But in that instance, it has led to other business partners and people in that community wanting to do more. And it was like, sometimes I think, in fact, I'm positive of this. There are a number of people who want to give and they're just waiting for the right ask, something they can believe in, something that makes sense, something that's relational. That's something that they want to be a part of, because that, at the end of the day, when you do give, and you just hinted at it strongly, when you give, you identify with that person. When you give, you necessarily, in one way or another, enter into life on life with that person. And life on life, real human, this is why I love jiu-jitsu. Above all the martial arts I've done, the thing that jiu-jitsu has, that other martial arts have but don't have it in the fullness that jiu-jitsu does, is on the mat. I'm setting aside everything else, and I'm entering into life on life with another human being, and I'm just breathing with them. I'm interacting with them. I have to have a high level of trust, have to have a high level of relationship. It's almost like you get to know more of somebody's personality rolling with them than you would based on what they say. Actions really do speak louder than words. Do they hold the submission too long? Do they seem to really enjoy it when you're in pain? Or is there a level of respect? And similarly, when you give of yourself, like you just said, when you give of yourself, you're identifying with that person. You're entering into authentic human relationship. And at the end of the day, again, the ambassador of kindness, culture-wide, religion-wide, for the most part, in every culture around the world, giving is the ambassador of kindness, and kindness is the product of something like recognizing the common human nature, that the things we all share in common, yeah. Right? And when you forget where you came from and you think, they can pull themselves up, they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Some people ain't got no boots. And it's like, no, I want to identify with them. I'm a better person for doing it, not to pass gratitude to myself, but to let go of something and be a part of the world around me, and not just stay isolated in my own little world.
Well, and I think, so I think you talked about challenges. You're like, oh, it challenged others. And I'm one of those people that I think that we all need goals in life. And that those who don't have like a set idea or something in mind that they want to do, a goal, then a lot of times they're less focused. Mm-hmm. They can find themselves lost easily. Sure. And when I set out with this goal, I talked to my husband Paulo, and I was like, hey, look, I really want to have this goal. I want to do this thing in November. But I felt really weird about all that. But after our conversation, I think you nail it on the head, where I want to give because I want to share a piece of who I am. Mm-hmm. Where like I don't want people hungry. I don't, I like security, and I want to help other people feel safe, secure, fed. And so I really, really liked doing this. And you know what? The challenge part is that we did 794 cans, yeah. I think is what we clocked the number at. And I'm like, I want to hit over 1,000, 1,500. And I think that once we get the ball rolling,
for sure.
And then I also, after our conversation of, hey, Nat, you're not doing this in a selfish way. You're doing this to help others. And then also, you talked about like how it helped everyone else see the good that we were doing, and that they could also become involved in it.
I think it speaks to the culture, what you just said. So it speaks to the culture, specifically the activity of PRBJJ, right? It speaks specifically to what you're doing and to the culture that you are developing and have developed. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I fell in love with the school right away, because there's a certain culture there that's reflective of the people who run it, of you and Paulo. And so what are you doing specifically? Well, you just said it. You're, in principle, you're empowering people, right? There's women that come to the self-defense class. I mean, I get like weepy when I see young girls doing jujitsu or women doing jujitsu, any martial art, but especially jujitsu, because it makes me think, oh, this isn't just somebody who maybe has to defend themselves, because two guys in a bar got in a bad attitude with each other. No, this is somebody who maybe, sometimes when I'm doing martial arts with girls, or I'm seeing girls training jiu-jitsu, sometimes maybe I'm over the top. Like the other day I told this girl doing some karate training, I'm like, listen, it might be a big giant man like me and he attacks you and I want you to get 5 seconds to get away and save your life. But it's like, she's like, wow, that elevated quickly. But I'm like, no, seriously. So you're empowering people with confidence to feel like they have a real possibility to create space or to cause a disruption in an attack long enough, or maybe to take control and own the situation, at least enough to survive. So you're giving that a sense of that. Well, that's not that different than what you're saying, where and I know from growing up in let's say, food instability or housing instability, or just like chaotic life growing up, that if you can give somebody a sense of stability, it speaks volumes to what they can become in the world, and to not have them live in fear. So the two things go hand in hand. So it's like, we have a culture in that jiu-jitsu school of empowering people. Now, I speak to women, but what about small men who, or what about men who have, let's say, some people who might come into that school who have emotional or psychological problems and or challenges, and then through the training,
or physical disabilities,
or I love. I listen to sometimes Jean-Jacques Machado, the famous jiu-jitsu practitioner who was born missing part of his hand. And like to this day, he's probably not somebody, even though his disability, probably not somebody you want to pick a fight with. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. And so all of that is something like parallel to goals for giving. So you already have a culture of giving. And then I love it because then people, I think the more we do things like that, and people see that, it speaks to the internal culture and the real identity of the school. What makes PRBJJ different than, let's say, some other schools where it's just like they're just focused on beating somebody up? That's it right there. Is that at the heart of the matter, it's more about empowerment. It's about elevation. It's about giving people a place or a platform upon which to develop their character, to become better people. And people come in, like you said, with various kinds of goals. One guy says, man, I don't want to get beat up like I got beat up last week. I need to defend myself against a bully. Somebody else says, life has been beating me down for decades, and I need something that can increase my confidence. It's like I tell people in the church. And I think, Paul and I have talked about this a few times. I'm like, I'm 90% preacher and 10% martial arts guy. And he's like 90% martial arts guy and 10% preacher. Because it's like, really, at the end of the day, while we're doing it in different ways, both are callings to equip people to be more, let's say, live a life more consistent with who God made them to be, and to grow, and then, to see people learn to do these kind of things. So, yeah.
Well, and I agree, where jiu-jitsu is I think that it's helping you, and my husband talks about this a lot. Paul talks about it, and he says jiu-jitsu is about making you the best version of yourself, right? We can never be perfect, but we can always strive to be better.
Yeah.
And with my with like my kind of I don't know, call like I feel like I was I was called or kind of encouraged internally through whatever means,
Yeah.
God, just my own personal kind of
Sure.
thoughts
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff to do this. So I really pushed, and I think that we did really, really well. I mean, I'm excited about it. It was a lot of totes.
Yeah, it was. They're very heavy.
And they were very heavy, and I picked them up. Some of those I picked up myself.
We distributed a bunch already, and somebody else tonight is coming to carry the rest away for me.
Okay.
And I was like, cool, just leave Natalie's totes, but take all. If I don't have to carry them, if you're going to come get them, please. And they've been given out to people in need.
And it's not to say, because we're not considered like extremely well off, but I do think that with something like that, like what was that old at, like, do what you can with what you have.
Absolutely. Do
And
what you
then
can where you are with what you have.
with what you have. And I think that if I also have, my favorite quote is by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it's a pretty long quote, but it kind of to kind of break it down is it says that if to have made one person's life just a little easier
Yeah.
is to have lived a successful life.
Absolutely.
And so I really try to be more positive, because I mean, easily I could have become a pessimist, and with my life. And so the fact that I choose now, you have to actively choose to be positive every day, and that's hard. And giving is hard. Like that wasn't easy. That took up, God, it took up like a quarter of our back room. So we have a very small facility.
Yeah.
And it took up so much space, and it was so messy.
Oh yeah.
But to see the little kid's face when they would go back there and there was a mountain
awesome.
of cans,
Yep.
or having your son Hansel, like his son, by the way, brought in like over 300 cans.
Yeah, it was,
So he was definitely excited.
He went to his pastor. His pastor has a soft spot for him to help him get cans.
AKA his dad.
Yeah.
And so I was really grateful and thankful for our conversation. And when I went to do a podcast, I kind of felt like I was being drawn to talk about this season, like, the season of giving, and really I was like, I want to bring Pastor Chris on board, because it just was a really, I'm telling you, I had a hard time, because I was like, well, how am I going to let everybody know? I didn't want to put it on social media. I didn't want to broadcast it. I don't like putting extra burdens on people. Sure. And so that's why my husband and I do a lot of what we do by ourselves, is because we don't like to delegate responsibility or add burdens to people. And so I had no idea. And I felt so guilty because I did the canned food drive, and then everybody, like the entire the public school system decided to do a canned food drive. So my children had to bring in canned food, all of our students. And so I was grateful that our parents like stuck it out and didn't.
Oh, but one of the things I've learned, and you put it into practice, and it's something that, like, I loved it when Paulo one time was talking about how he played pool, and he doesn't know how to play pool, like billiards pool.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, how do I apply jujitsu to this? So he was thinking leverage, angles, and so life leverage, right? If it's true, and I'm convinced it's true, that from the martial arts that you can extrapolate lessons for every part of your life. In fact, maybe more well than in almost any other way. And so what did you do? So leverage is better than muscle. When we reached a place in our work in Haiti when I realized I couldn't possibly fund it myself anymore. And that's when we incorporated a ministry. And I said, I have to get more leverage. I have to get more people involved. And so rather than doing anything on your own, here's another example of how you applied jujitsu with leverage by saying, well, we can leverage more resources if I invite all these people to be a part of it. And then, of course, Hansel used like strong arming, leverage to get more cans. But I think there's an example where directly from jiu-jitsu, just like Paulo using it to play pool, and it's like directly for giving, it's wrapped up right inside of there. Oh, so we can employ, like, if I want to get Americana, I'm better off doing 2-on-1 to get the arm down. Well, now it did, whatever, however many students there are, 100 on one, whatever, to accomplish one goal. And so I think it's inherent in many ways, again, the culture, the practice, the things that the school stands for and does, then giving in these ways is just another expression of that. Okay. You know.
Well, and this conversation I had with him, and I'm kind of having it again in this podcast, but I cannot express to you guys how much better it made me feel, because I did really have a hard time with that. But I'm excited now, because then all of a sudden I was like, because we had done the canned food drive, and I was like, what are we going to do for December? And I normally, and I told Pastor Chris, normally what I do is I actually do the giving tree, and I get like tags, and we help seniors. But I wanted to go in a different direction this year, and I racked my brain, and I ended up seeing a Dolly Parton YouTube video. All right, yeah, right. I know, follow me. He's laughing at me. And Dolly Parton was reading, and she's huge on making sure children become literate. And I was like, you know what, books. And so we're doing where if you bring in canned cat food, dog food, or anything like that for animals, we're going to donate it to the Humane Society, because my oldest is an animal lover, like loves dogs in almost a crazy fashion. And so I was like, all right, we'll do that. And then every child that brings in a bag of food actually gets to pick from this big, huge tote of books that I went out and purchased. And I did all kinds of books. I did, because I also didn't want to just push reading, because you get some kids, like I have a lot of like little guys, and they don't read yet. So I did like activity coloring books that included crayons. I did journaling, because I want people to write. I just posted something the other day, and it said, ways to improve your mood. And it's like, exercise, meditate, write if you want to really express yourself. Absolutely. And you're having a hard time talking, like journal, write, keep a diary. And so those were things that I went out and I got. So anyway, to close, because we're pushing the 30-minute mark. Yeah. Pastor Chris and I easily have very long conversations. Yes. He's pretty easy to talk to. So in order, like, I want to know more, like, what are some easy ways that we can promote giving on a small scale where they are helping out in a big way? Yeah. Like through your church, like through sure. Because I don't know if our team understands that we did 700 and something cans, and then we were able to provide it we gave it to your church. Yeah. And then you guys have, I mean, goodness, that was a lot of cans. Like that had to have fed lots of families. We've already distributed it to several families in need. Pastor Cruz and I, who is the Spanish-speaking pastor, we have a Spanish worship service on Sunday afternoons. And he and I talked about how best to give them out. And we identified a bunch of families in need, several of whom we've already helped after the hurricane, and then others who are just people who are always in substantial need. And so we've already distributed a bunch of bags of food. And then tonight he's coming with another pastor that he knows in Bonita Springs who's going to go, and they have a food distribution program. And so the rest will go out through there. I think you can't underestimate the value of even the smallest gift. For example, somebody might say, well, how does helping the Humane Society help people? For one, somebody's dog or pet could save their life, not just a security animal, but somebody who maybe, you never know what somebody's going through. And I long story, but there was a time in my life when I moved to a new city and my best friend was a dog. And for a year, I didn't really know anybody, but that dog, and then I made some friends later. But that dog was a really important part of my life. There's people who won't leave their homes during a hurricane because they can't take their pets. Yeah. And many of them are unaware that they could put them at the shelter. The shelter will take their pet while they go away. And many rescue shelters let you take your pets. Well, and so in the smallest way, you could do something that makes a big difference in somebody's life. Oh, I agree. And just to add on to that, like my uncle, or like my great uncle. Yeah. So after his wife died, they got him a dog, small, tiny little like Shar-Pei or something, and it helped with the quality of life. It
yeah.
helped extend his life.
Right.
He was such a happier person. Like he was dealing with depression,
Yeah.
and that dog helped him. Like I completely believe in service animals.
Sure.
When like my daughter, for example, Annabella has a ton of anxiety, and she loves her dog.
Yeah.
That dog can calm her down. She's hanging with her dog.
Henzo.
Henzo. Yeah. All of our dogs.
Yeah.
All of our dogs have been named after jiu-jitsu black belts, like from the Gracie family. We had one that was Hoist.
And Paulo teaches them jiu-jitsu.
He does. We had one named Hickson, and currently we have one named Henzo.
Yeah.
And he does. He teaches them leg drags and all kinds of stuff. So, but
I think you can't underestimate what you do. Like, just the people underestimate this fundamental truth that is by definition true. The world is changed one action at a time. What you do really matters. How you interact with one human being today could be the catalyst or the little bitty piece that is a huge and tremendous impact in their life. It sounds cliche to say smile at people when you see them. I know for sure people I've counseled in my office in churches who had been impacted tremendously because they showed up at a church on a day when they were considering maybe the worst things that they could do to themselves, and somebody welcomed them with kindness. So sometimes that can of food, what really matters is the spirit with which it was given. And so just the fact of remembering, the fact of considering someone, we change the world by how we act. Our attitudes actually change the world. One act of kindness, one thing you do. I have an adopted daughter from Haiti, and I sometimes say, I don't know if this changed Haiti, but I know it greatly reduced the amount of suffering that would have otherwise occurred in that community in her life just by bringing her into my home. And so is that going to change the world? Is she going to change the world? Yes. Maybe not the way you think. Maybe she's not going to be the next great inventor, but that's a little less suffering in the world. The world is better because of it. And again, that's not me breaking my arm. Just by an example, something you think is a big thing or a little thing, everything has significant ripple effects and impacts into the. So I think that's a primary principle. You can't underestimate what you do, how it could matter to somebody.
Yeah.
For real, not cliche.
Well, and like for me, and I tell people, they're like, why do you teach jiu-jitsu? And I tell them, I was like, I remember being that kid and that one teacher. Martial arts made a huge difference.
Absolutely.
That one teacher. So that's why, like, I'm a huge. Yeah. I try my best not to holler at kids. I never try to get mad at kids. Right. I understand that all behavior is communication.
Absolutely.
I know that they, just smiling at them and letting them know that it's okay to mess up. Even yesterday, like I have this kid that he drives me bonkers.
Right.
And I took a deep breath and I get down on his level and I talk to him like, hey man, when you're awesome, I was like, when you work hard, you're awesome.
Right.
Can I see some awesomeness right now? Because that's what I need.
Right.
And he did. He turned it around. He did great. And I try to be. I always figure. I also think that you can always be mean later.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so, but giving, like I try to give in like how I teach. I try to give when it comes to like food because it's something I believe in and I agree with. And that's not to say like. I don't want this podcast. People are like, oh, Natalie was like, she was starving to death when she was a kid. Yeah. That's not the case. I mean, like when there were times as like a younger adult, first married with Paulo, where like we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and I was trying to find very, frugal ways of making sure that we had enough to eat.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that's I think that's part of life. And I think you need to go through those hardships and trials in order to become a better version of yourself. But that's also why now I was so adamant about doing the canned food drive. And I like the book drive. We're getting a positive response from it. Sure. I'm getting, it's much more, children focused. Yeah. And so I'm getting a lot of the youth and the juniors that are bringing in stuff, and then they get to go pick their book.
Yeah, nice.
But I don't have many adults who are like, I have more adults, especially so Naples is a weird place. If most of the people who listen to this podcast, they're like team members and stuff, or they know us. Yeah. But those who don't understand, Naples is a very weird
place.
Niche. And you do have you have two extremes. So you have the people who have a lot of money, and then you have the people who don't.
Yeah.
And they're barely squeaking by. And this is definitely going to help. At least I feel.
No, for sure.
And
Absolutely.
then the books, I feel like that, with my other kind of giving this season, I feel like those will help in a different manner.
Oh yeah.
That'll
And again, it's planting more seeds in the direction of the culture of the school.
And I think
of the things that are good, the positive, promoting good things.
Well, and I want to be, I want our school, I want people, I was like, I want to leave a legacy.
Yeah.
And the legacy is the kid, the little kid in my class. I want them to be 30, 40 years old.
Yeah.
And they go, I remember Professor Natalie.
Yeah.
I remember Professor Paulo.
Absolutely.
I said, and I feel like I have then succeeded. I don't care how much money I have.
Yeah.
I don't care what car I drive.
Yeah.
I care that little kid will remember me in 20 or 30 years.
Absolutely.
And think, oh, they made a difference.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Pastor Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
It has been a hot minute. Thank you so much for chatting with me and coming on here. I dragged him here, guys. I dragged him here. No, I'm joking. But all right, well, I appreciate you. And guys, please keep it posted. Professor Bianca and Professor Dijon are here in town. I'm going to be doing some podcasts with Professor Bianca. I'll probably be doing a co-interview with Professor Dijon and Professor Paulo, so you'll get to actually hear them on the podcast. So look forward to it. Pastor Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, you guys have a great
Absolutely.
day. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye-bye.